All right, now we're going to get the opportunity to listen to our 3 corporation commissioner candidates, Beau Williams, Ashley Nicole McCray, and Blake Cummings. Get out of the way there, but. I'm sure a lot of you know Corporation Commission, what they do, but among some of their other tasks that they do, they regulate public utilities, oil and gas drilling, production, and related environment protection, safety aspects of rail and pipeline systems, and the environmental integrity of petroleum storage tank system. Just a handful of things that they do. They do a whole lot of stuff, but we're going to now meet them. And we flipped the coin, as you guys saw, and Beau Williams, you get to go first. And
thank you.
First question is, we'll have 2 minutes for an introduction, then 2 minutes for each question,
okay.
And then we'll have a 2-minute closing statement at the end.
Okay.
But first question, first, would you please introduce yourself and what compelled you to seek office and your vision for the office?
Thank you. My name is Beau Williams. I am running for Corporation Commission. The thing that compelled me to run for this was first, in the beginning, was the fact that I've been practicing law for going on 40 years. The last 3 years I've spent in litigation trying to stop these earthquakes. It is clear that it's going to take more than just the court system to actually accomplish that on a permanent basis, that there needs to be regulation by the Commission that's effective to stop the cause, and we can't only do that in the court system. My vision for the Commission and for our state is pretty simple. One, I would seek, as your commissioner, I would seek proper regulations so that the earthquakes stop and do not happen again. I would seek transparency in the Corporation Commission, including an environmental impact statement of every task before it. This was originally a matter of federal legislation back in the 60s that has stood until Scott Pruitt took office as our EPA director and disbanded it in effect. 3, I would see to it that utility rates are dropped, and the way that that would happen would be first that all of the energy cost savings from our utility companies that are being enjoyed would be passed on to the ratepayers. That is not happening as an actuality. That is not happening. Third, I would, the other way to drop the drop the utility rates is to open up a free, completely fair competition between all energy sources. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we could be known as the energy state? We have everything we need right here. We have oil, we have gas, we have wind, we have solar, we have hydrothermal, and we have hydroelectric. We've got everything we need and more. And that's part of my vision. My vision would be to be known as the energy state. My vision for utilities would be to drop them. My vision for the earthquakes is to stop them. And I would see to it that all of our state would have adequate cell phone and internet service, where right now 40% of our state does not. And that's my vision.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next we'll...
You see? Okay.
Yeah. Next we'll hear from Ashley Nicole McCray, and please introduce yourself and your vision.
Hi, my name is Ashley Nicole McCray, and I am the Democratic candidate for Oklahoma Corporation Commission. A little bit about me. I was born and raised in Shawnee, Oklahoma, and I currently live in Norman. Some of the things that I would like to accomplish once I'm elected to this position: first, we need to get a hold on the frac quakes. The first thing that we need to do, we need to ban the injection wells that are causing these frac quakes, because not only are we injecting our own frac wastewater into the ground, we're accepting the frac wastewater of other states as well. And the time to say enough is now. We are not a disposable people, and this is not a disposable land. But we can't just tear something down without building something up. So the second tier of my platform is to open up a pathway for renewable energy. In my community of Norman, where I live, I'm part of the RF 100 campaign, Ready for 100, which was just recently successful in becoming the first city in Norman and the 70th in the nation to transition to commit to a policy that will transition us to 100% renewable energy by the year 2035. I'm helping Edmond and Tulsa with their campaigns as well. So I see this as not just good for our environment, but our economy as well. And the third thing that I would like to accomplish once I'm elected to this position is to open up avenues for greater transparency. One of the biggest frustrations that I found going throughout the state, and this is my 33rd event in this primary actually, so I've been all over the state, and the number one frustration that people have at the Corporation Commission, they can't get a hold of anybody. There's no transparency, there's no accountability, and there's no communication. So one of my things to do to resolve this issue is to demand full-scale environmental impact statements that assess the cumulative impacts of every single project that comes in through the Corporation Commission's door. Not only will this assess the cumulative impacts of these projects for the health and well-being of the communities that are being impacted by these projects, it will also account for tribal sovereignty. And we know that in Oklahoma, we have 39 federally recognized tribes that we're supposed to be embarking on government-to-government relationships with, and that many of these tribes already have regulations within their tribal jurisdictions that could protect all Oklahomans. So these are some of the things that I would like to accomplish once I'm elected to this position, and I'm really excited to hear some of the questions.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh,
all right.
Yes.
Next, we'll hear from Blake Cummings. Welcome to Guthrie, and please introduce yourself and your vision for the office.
Sure. Well, thank you. I'm Blake Cummings. I live in Seminole County, Oklahoma, on the Little River, on 30 acres, with my wife, my daughter, and my Great Dane. I was born in Muskogee and grew up in Haskell County, Oklahoma, where my dad was a school superintendent in Kenna, and my mother, besides taking care of my brother and I, was a member of the Choctaw Nation Housing Authority Board. We are Choctaw on my mother's side. I went to school at the University of Oklahoma and graduated with a degree in petroleum land management. And for most of the last 30 years, I've been in the oil and gas industry. I've also worked on the public utility side, and I've also worked in government relations. And I think it gives me a unique look at how the Corporation Commission works, since I had to deal with it on almost a daily basis for a number of years. Back in my 20s, I helped my high school drill their own gas well behind the gym over Christmas break. They were just about out of money. Their heating bill was taking up a third of their general fund. And we had determined that there was a shallow gas vein that they could go to. And so we scrounged up the funds, took bids, got a rig to come in, and hooked the well up over Christmas break. And for the next 25 years, our school never had a heating bill because they were able to use this well. And I've always been very proud of that. Like I say, I've worked in the industry all these years. I know how the Corporation Commission works. I've drilled some of my own wells, and every month that I had a well, every month that we had production, I paid a 7% gross production tax and never gave it a second thought. As I've said many times before, if you're a salesman and you have a 10% commission, that's a cost of doing business. That's something you pay to get these things sold. This is the equivalent of what we've had recently of someone saying, I've been giving you 10% commission, but I'm going to give you 2% now because I want to make more money. And that's happened because of who's running our state government, and I bet we get into that in a few minutes, and I'll tell you more about it later. But thank you guys for coming out.
Thank you, Blake. I have 6 questions. You guys answered them all already, so appreciate it. But maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on these. And we will let Ashley begin with this next question. Oklahoma is well known for its drilling and oil gas production. Has the Corporation Commission done all that it can to regulate oil companies, hydraulic fracturing, and saltwater disposal?
No, the Corporation Commission has not done all it can do to regulate these industries. And in fact, last October, I confronted the current chairman of the Corporation Commission, Bob Anthony, on the steps of the Corporation Commission, where we questioned him, myself and other concerned citizens of Oklahoma, questioned Commissioner Anthony about the injection wells, about the frac quakes, about what he's going to do in his capacity as a commissioner to make sure that the people of Oklahoma are not being devastated and impacted by these man-made causes. What Commissioner Anthony told us, and part of the reason why I feel compelled to run, is that yes, We were right. We were justified in our frustration in going to this place, going to this agency and letting them know why we're upset, because they are the avenue, they are the agency to make sure that the injection wells are gone. They're the agency that can make sure that frac quakes no longer happen in Oklahoma. What have they done so far to make sure that it is alleviated? They have taken steps. So that shows me that they know that this is what is causing it. And they know that, that moving towards reduction and ultimately elimination of injection wells is the only way to stop earthquakes. Commissioner Anthony, in his position as a corporation commissioner, has reduced the number of injection wells in the state, but I don't think that's enough. We have the research, we have the data, we have the evidence. It's available on the Corporation Commission's website. Injection wells in Oklahoma are causing our earthquakes. We need to stop earthquakes, and the way to do that is by not just reducing the number of injection wells we have in our state, but by eliminating them as well. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll, Blake, same question. Has the Corporation Commission done all that it can to regulate oil companies, hydraulic fracturing, and saltwater disposal?
Right. The short answer to that is no, they have not. They have actually done as little as they possibly can. They've done pretty much what they have to do to make it seem as if they're worried about it. But the problem is, and this is what I was alluding to in my last question at the end of it, our Corporation Commission, along with most of our state government, is being run now by a very small group of very influential, very rich people who have their interests in mind, not the interest of 3.9 million. Now, if you remember when we first had the big quake over in Prague in 2011, I know we'd had smaller ones before then, but that was the first big one. And there was some research done saying at the geological survey, that this quakes look like they may be related to the injection wells. Well, the industry started interfering with that process then, and the next thing you know, the Corporation Commission's coming out and saying there's no correlation between these earthquakes and our drilling activity. And that was 7 years ago. And it was like pulling teeth to get them to finally admit that there is a correlation. It's because it was going to work against their financial best interest to take responsibility for that. Now, the bottom line is 90% of the earthquakes in Oklahoma now are related to the injection wells. Not so much the fracking. We've been doing fracking for decades. But the injection wells are certainly the culprit, and they can pinpoint when these earthquakes happen which well was likely to have caused it. Well, I have a plan for stopping these earthquakes myself. My wife said call it Blake's quake plan. I don't want to do that. It's not my quakes. They're not your quakes, but they're the industry's quakes. And what we've got to do is keep you guys from having to pay a high earthquake insurance rider with a high deductible and have to pay your own damages and your own premiums for something that an industry is causing. And I have a plan for that, and I bet I don't get to say it right now because the thing's beeping, but if we get another related question later, I'll give you a little detail about how it works.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Beau.
Thank you. No, the Corporation Commission has been taking care of the industry for years that it is supposed to regulate. It's like the child selecting his own babysitter because the industry has elected Republicans only on that commission for years. They have dominated it, and they have the industry has elected its own regulators, and that's absurd. There are some very strategic things that the commission could do that are very simple and that are completely within their authority to do. Any injection well has downhole equipment that measures the amount of wastewater that's being disposed, the amount and the volume. These companies keep record of that. Sooner or later, they turn it over to the Oklahoma Geological Survey to see if it kind of sort of matches up, if there's any correlation with earthquakes, with seismic activity. There should be a requirement that that information be reported in real time, moment, to match it up with all these seismic testing areas that are all over our state. And the moment that there is seismic activity, it should stop, and it should stop immediately. I absolutely disagree that all injection wells should leave the state of Oklahoma. We've got to have injection wells to dispose of wastewater, and there will always be wastewater with oil. It comes up out of the ground in various different proportions, but we will always have wastewater to dispose of. The problem with what's happened is that these companies have been allowed to dump into these injection wells wherever these wells are closest to their drilling site, closest to their production. And it's an ongoing thing. It's not just at the moment of the initial drilling. It's production water. It's going to keep coming. The water should never, here's the problem, the water should never, ever, ever be allowed to be disposed of right on top of or near known geological fault lines that are fragile to begin with and that are moving with the weight of that water. Most of this movement is from on faults that haven't moved for at least 300 million years. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Our next question will be for Blake, and I did not know you guys were coming till 2 o'clock, so it's as if this question was set up for you, but it was not, I promise. If elected, how will you protect Oklahomans from man-made earthquakes?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that. Okay, as you said earlier, the injection wells are truly related to over 90% of the earthquakes we have in Oklahoma. You and I know we did not used to have felt earthquakes in Oklahoma very often. It was something you didn't even consider. You had low earthquake insurance because that was considered an act of God or act of nature. This is an act of the industry. These are man-made problems. So here's my solution. If you're familiar with the oil and gas industry, I know many of you aren't, but anytime you drill a gas well, you have to file a plugging bond. And that's a bond of, it can be, it's several $1,000s, $20,000, $30,000, maybe more now, that is filed with the operator, shared with the Corporation Commission, and put in the Corporation Commission's basically hands, so that if you skip town or go broke or whatever, that money's used to plug your well and make it safe again so you don't have some open wellbore out there. I propose basically a seismic bond. For anyone that's going to do injection wells or drilling in areas where we're going to have this kind of activity, they need to put up this bond. And what it will do, it will form a fund of all these bonds from all these wells, so that if somebody's out there and forces water in under high pressure and causes earthquakes that cause damage, chimneys come down, roofs collapse, whatever, instead of you buying expensive insurance, you go to the OCC and make your claim. And then they pay it. There's no deductible. If you had $800 worth of damage, there should be $800 coming to you out of that fund. This is funded by the oil and gas industry. It makes them look good because they're trying to protect you and protect themselves too with this system. It takes the insurance companies out of it, and a lot of the insurance companies don't want to mess with Oklahoma earthquakes anyway because they don't know how many we're going to have and how intense they're going to be. This is the best solution we could have right now to fight this. And these companies that are causing these earthquakes, when they have a direct financial responsibility, they're going to find ways to cause less earthquakes and get the same work done. Nobody's telling them they can't use injection wells, but you can't use injection wells at the expense of the property owners in Oklahoma. And that's my plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Blake. Beau?
Yes, sir.
Again, how will you protect Oklahomans from man-made earthquakes?
Well, Lake had some great ideas. One of the problems we're running into in the litigation, however, is that once this bedrock is moving, even on its own momentum, it's going to keep moving. So the locale of individual quakes, individual damages to homes on top of those quakes is extremely difficult to pin to a singular event or a singular well. So we've got to stop it before that happens. He's absolutely correct that the oil companies need a financial stake in this mess, and I believe that that can only happen after the fact, after there are damages, and that's just simply not enough. These quakes have to be stopped before they begin, before they're put in motion. I'm sorry, what was your question?
How will you protect Oklahomans from man-made earthquakes?
That's it, prevent them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Ashley.
Yeah, so I'm no fool. I'm not naive. I understand that oil in Oklahoma is going to be a long-lasting, enduring thing, and we cannot get rid of oil writ large anytime in the near future, and that's not what I'm advocating for. The purpose of the Corporation Commission is to serve as a facilitating body between corporations and our citizens. And right now, what we're seeing is that the voice and the entity of our corporations is what's being protected. But the voice of the people is being completely neglected and left out. And that's what I'm trying to do, is to restore our voice back into this agency that really dictates our everyday lived experiences here in Oklahoma. So one of the things that the corporation can do, in addition to regulating the industry, in addition to eliminating or reducing the number of injection wells, in addition to banning outside states from dumping their frack wastewater into our Oklahoma land, one of the things that the Corporation Commission is responsible for is upholding EPA regulations such as the Clean Water Act. And many people may not be aware, but the Clean Water Act has a loophole called the Halliburton loophole that actually exempts fracking from the Clean Water Act. So this means anything that fracking does that pollutes or contaminates the water sources around it, we can't do anything about. One thing the Oklahoma Corporation Commission can do, because they actually advocate for local control and regulation above and beyond EPA regulation, they can actually close the Halliburton loop and make sure that that Clean Water Act actually accounts for our fracking industry as well, because in Oklahoma, our water is being polluted at an enormous, alarming rate. And the path that we're on currently is completely destructive. So beyond making sure that our Corporation Commission is actually advocating and restoring the voice of Oklahoma citizens who they are charged to protect, and making sure that they are actually regulating the corporations instead of protecting them, I think that these are some of the ways that we can move forward together as Oklahomans in concert with the oil industry in a way that benefits all of us instead of just the industry and 2% like Harold Hamm. So those are some of the things and suggestions that I have to remedy the situation of man-made earthquakes, to protect our water, and to make sure that all Oklahomans' voices are being accounted for in the state agency when they make their decisions.
Thank you. All right, our next question, we'll begin with Beau with this one.
Yes, sir.
Wind power is becoming more and more seen and talked about. What is the future for the wind power with the Corporation Commission?
Well, so far, wind has been thwarted both with the commission and with the legislature in several manners of ways by oil. Oil doesn't want the competition. The truth of it is only, I think, 9.3, something less than 10% of all electric power in Oklahoma right now is generated by wind. Wind generation is a fraction of what it costs to generate electricity from gas or from coal. It's cheap, it's safe, it's renewable, and it is infinite. There is a huge wave all across the United States of going towards wind with this recognition. I believe that wind is going to be in our future in a very solid way. I truly believe that there should be unleashed, unfettered, uncontrived competition between all energy sources, not just wind. Thank you.
Thank you. Ashley, again, what is the future for the wind power with the Corporation Commission?
So I hope that the future of wind in Oklahoma is something that can make all of us proud, because we're actually one of the top 5 producers of wind in the nation, and there's no reason that we can't be #1. As I said earlier, I'm part of a campaign across the state to push for the transition to renewable energy. So this work is already being done. So what this tells me is that this transition to renewable energy in Oklahoma is inevitable. And it's our job as Oklahomans today who are aware of that to make sure that the transition is just and equitable and includes everybody. So here in Logan County, for example, wind is actually one of this county's highest taxpayers. And this is something that is seen all throughout the state. Wind, the industry of wind, is actually contributing an enormous amount of funding to our education system and to our county governments. So this is something that we need to consider whenever we move forward. I know that there's a lot of propaganda coming out that is really resistant to the wind industry, and I understand that there are some things that are happening with the wind industry that we need to resolve so that we can make sure that it benefits all Oklahomans. It shouldn't be the case that the wind turbines that are in Oklahoma are benefiting economies outside of the state or even outside of the country. I completely agree with that. We need to bring these jobs back home to Oklahoma, and the wind industry is one opportune economic factor that we can really rely on to make sure that those jobs that we're losing from the oil industry can be funneled into the wind industry. We know that in rural communities especially, the wind industry is a huge employer of Oklahomans, and this is something that we're seeing happening in Texas and other states as well. So I think that my hope for wind in Oklahoma, especially as far as the Corporation Commission is concerned, is that we do open that pathway for the wind industry to compete in our energy sector, because not only is it good for our economy, it's good for our environment, it brings jobs to rural communities, it funds our education programs, it funds our communities and our counties, and beyond that, I think that moving to more diversifying our energy sector is only going to be a good thing for Oklahoma economy in the long run. We can't rely on just one industry to carry us all the way through, especially an industry like fossil fuel, which will eventually run out and often does hit really sharp ups and downs in the market. We need something that is consistent, that we can look forward to managing our budgets, and wind and solar is one way of doing that. We can budget 25 years down the road, whereas we can't do the same with oil and gas. So my hope is that our vision and our views regarding wind and renewable energy will change, and that we'll start moving forward in a way that benefits all Oklahomans, our economy, and our environment.
Thank you. And Blake, again, what is the future for the wind power with the Corporation Commission?
Okay. Well, we happen to live in a state where the wind comes sweeping down the plain and has been for quite a while and always will. It's a part of our history. Oil and gas is a part of our history too. But you have to keep in mind, someday, long after the last drop of oil has been taken and the last molecule of natural gas has been pulled out of a well, the wind will still blow and the sun will still shine. So we have to be thinking in terms of, as my opponents have said earlier, we got to be thinking in terms of being an energy state, not just oil and gas, but wind and solar. We can't let some other state get, end up getting the funding and everything for it because we're holding on, to old technology too long. The wind catcher program is really big. A lot of the oil and gas companies across the nation are looking at wind and solar options. They're looking at ways to use hybrid forms of energy. We're seeing it in our cars now, hybrid forms of energy. This is the future. The future is renewable energy. We're not going to make oil out of water. We're not going to make natural gas appear out of just nowhere. We got plentiful supplies. We got great technology. So it'll be a while before we run into that problem. But let me tell you this: no Middle East country will cause us to have to raise our wind rates because they're shutting down the wind or the solar or the sun. They're not going to do that. They have that influence over us in hydrocarbons, and that's always been a difficult thing for us, to be at the mercy of OPEC. Well, we won't be at the mercy of anyone with alternative energy. So we need to push for that. We need to concentrate on being an energy state, and we need to do it from the bottom up, from the local cities all the way up to the governor's office, to the universities, everything. OU is wind power energy is providing OU's electricity, and did for over a 5-year period. They said we're going to transition over, and they have. Everybody needs to do that. Oil and gas is great. Oil and gas has paid for my life, so to speak. I've been in that industry for so long, but you got to think about the future, and you got to think about tomorrow and what your kids are going to be doing and your grandkids. So we have to concentrate on this, and I think we will. I think we will.
Thank you. I have one more question to get to, but I'll put my question on hold and get to some of our audience questions here. We'll begin with Ashley on this one. Who manages the bond money, and what happens to unused bond money?
Bond money, this is a question that I actually am not, I'm going to be honest, as our other candidate said, and say that I don't really honestly know the answer to that question. But that is something that I will be committed to do as a corporation commissioner. I do have an extensive background in researching. I have 2 master's degrees and I'm working on my PhD. I specialize in industrialization, political economy, and the environment. So I am spending all my time finding out our environmental legislation, such as HB 1123, how that impacts our communities, and the different regulations and different cases that have come out on the Corporation Commission's website. So that's definitely something that I need to find out, and I'm not going to lie and pretend like I don't know the answer to that question. But it is, if you do have questions for me, I will be committed to answering those questions and finding the answers the best I can. If I don't have the answer right away, you can trail me down, you can track me down, you can call me, you can email me, and I will do my best to make sure that I find that answer for you.
Thank you, Ashley. Who manages the bond money? What happens to unused bond money?
Okay, are we talking about the seismic bond money that we were I was relating to on the insurance?
Yes.
Okay. All right, yeah, and I've thought about that. First thing we got to do to get this plan, we have to get it passed through the legislature. Legislature has to okay it, governor has to sign it. That needs to be where their involvement ends completely. I don't want the legislature having access to this money to make decisions. Oh, we're going to go and do this or do that with it. If there's going to be a percentage of it that needs to go to support education or something first, fine. But I don't want to sound all Al Gore on you, but I want to lockbox this thing down so that it's used for the earthquake claims. Because if we start having more, they start doing deeper and deeper injections with more and more pressure, we're going to have bigger and bigger earthquakes. So my suggestion is, as they do with the plugging bonds, it basically is in trust and held by the Oklahoma Corporation Commission. The fact that this is related to insurance, I'm pretty sure the Insurance Commission has to be involved at some point, so it's probably going to be a combination of the Corporation Commission and the Insurance Commission overseeing this, making sure claims are legit, and making sure the amounts are accurate and making sure it gets paid. But the bottom line is I don't want the legislature or anybody else messing with it. We just want to get it passed, get it done, and leave it alone.
Thank you. Beau.
I might have misunderstood your question. Are you talking about the bonds that are posted before they drill, or are you talking about the bonds, the notion of a bond to be posted against earthquake litigation?
Both.
Both? Oh,
Yes.
okay. Well, in the plugging bond, that is posted at the time the well is drilled and completed to ensure that when the well is done, when it is no longer usable, that a hole is just simply left. And those people know when their well has run out. And so they either plug it and then make application to get their bond money back, or if they can't be found and they've just abandoned the well, then the commission uses that money for that expense of that bond. On the notion of requiring a bond against earthquake damage, if that's done, I would think that that would be very much like the tobacco litigation. There were millions created in that litigation into a trust. And that trust is operated completely separate from any entity that regulates tobacco. It is operated by a series of people that are on that trust. Drew Edmondson is still on that trust and has been since he was Attorney General and did that tobacco litigation. The expenditures of that must be very, very protected. I can tell you that when the state of Oklahoma got in this crisis that's going on now for 3 years, that there was a lot of talk by certain industries to tap into that fund to help cover the shortfall when the gross production tax was lowered. That didn't happen. Those trustees work as trustees and they protect that. They protect that money.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'd like to get to the last 3 questions, hopefully, so if we can maybe make our comments to about 60 seconds so we can get to all the questions here.
Yes,
our next question, we'll let Blake begin first, again from our audience. Do you believe wastewater ponds could be a part of the injection well problem?
Well, wastewater in general is, I mean, just the very nature of it is a problem. Whether you got a surface disposal or an underground disposal, we've got all this wastewater with all these products. Now we're supposed to neutralize them, you know, and try to make them safer. And you've seen the guy on TV who was going to, you know, drink the frack water. Supposedly wastewater is supposed to be even cleaner than that. I don't think so. But we need to take a good long look at what we're doing with wastewater. New technology someday, soon, and maybe it's in the work. I know it's in the works right now. I don't know when they're going to finalize it, but they're finding ways to take this wastewater and clean it up. And that's going to help a lot. But the other thing that's going to help right now today, and I'd love to do this as a commission, is to stop wastewater from coming from Kansas and Texas and being dumped into Oklahoma wells. We are not going to be a septic tank for other states, and we need to put an end to that right now.
Thank you. Beau.
I think the surface disposal of wastewater is not so much a danger to creating earthquakes as it is a danger to the integrity of our water, of our groundwater, of our surface water that we use through the aquifers that we drink, that services us. I think anytime that you put toxins into water and then let it sit anywhere, you're still going to have the toxins, and I've never believed that any of that can actually be effectively neutralized. I think it poses an extreme hazard to our source of water, probably more so than causing earthquakes. Thank you.
Ashley.
So the above surface wastewater is not actually such a major contributing problem to the earthquakes as the injection wells are, but they definitely contribute to the extreme environmental degradation that the state of Oklahoma is experiencing. This is part of the reason why I'm advocating for an environmental impact statement that will assess the cumulative impacts of every project that comes in from development all the way to disposal. Because one of the things that we don't really realize is that some of the long-lasting impacts of this environmental degradation, of this pollution from wastewater, from these fossil fuel extractive projects can be a lot long lasting than what we can actually account for today. So for instance, if farmers are using that reclaimed wastewater to water their crops, for instance, that contaminates the crops. And that can very much impact the health of the Oklahomans who are consuming that vegetable. So there are many different things that need to be considered in these environmental impact statements, and I think that requiring them for every single project will help account and alleviate for some of the degradation that we're experiencing.
Thank you. We'll begin, Beau, with this question. It's kind of long, so hopefully I'll speak up so you all can hear it, so I don't have to repeat it. Thoughts on Oklahoma, the first state to be approached as a state for disposed of toxic ash. Excuse me. What are your thoughts about Oklahoma today becoming the first state to be granted a coal ash disposal contract?
I think it's absurd. I think it's a direct reflection of the lack of any sensitivity towards the integrity of the environment, of our ground, on the earth beneath us, our water, our lives. We've got to get a Democrat on the commission to help get this straightened out. And it's not going to happen overnight, but that is a direct reflection of the lack of care by the people that are in charge right now on the commission. As well as Mr. Cummings alluded to, Oklahoma is allowing wastewater, fracking water, toxic substances to be dumped on the perimeters of our state because it's closer. It's closer to these production wells in the states of Kansas and Arkansas and Texas. And so rather than hauling it to their saltwater disposal wells or their wastewater disposals, they're bringing it and dumping it here because we're simply not regulating. It's absurd. It's absurd. It's wrong.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ashley.
So the decision made by the administration recently is devastating for me. Last year, I spent about 5 months living in a tent in southeast Oklahoma, advocating for Oklahomans who are being impacted by eminent domain and environmental degradation because of the Diamond Pipeline. And Connie visited us, of course. And while down there, one of the things that I learned, that is coal mining country in Oklahoma. And it's devastating the impacts that those communities down there are facing because of the fly ash spill-off, because of the deep strip coal mines. They're not even being able to consent to these projects that are taking place in their communities right beneath their feet. I was right by the community of Bokashi, which has really strongly advocated against this development that is happening. So I feel in my heart breaks for the people that live in southeast Oklahoma. Because what's even more disconcerting to me is that this coal is not even high enough grade to be exported outside of the state. It's only being used solely to fuel nuclear waste facilities in Oklahoma. And that really, really bothers me because our people are being exploited, our land is being exploited only for the benefit of a few. And I think that we need to say enough is enough. This is unacceptable.
Thank you. Blake?
That's right.
Now, not to repeat the question, but was this the EPA, an EPA
The children down there were
authorization?
abandoned deep strip coal mine. That's so sad.
I don't think it specifically said EPA. What are your thoughts about Oklahoma today becoming the first state to be granted a coal ash disposal contract?
Okay, okay. Well, I know the EPA is related in there
waste.
somewhere.
It's other people's waste.
Yes, that's what I'm alluding to. You think about this, and Ashley, she knows this. She's been on the front line down there in Bokashi, and I grew up just a few miles down the road from there. That is a dangerous stuff. There are higher incidences of cancer down there from people who live downwind of where the ash piles are. But think about it. If you want to talk about this and get a designation to authorize this and have this coal ash basically laying out there on top of the ground right now, which it is, you do it in a state that is going to be friendly to the people who have the most to lose, which are the big companies that don't want to pay for the disposal and don't want to pay for the cleanup and don't want to pay for your cancer. So you go through the EPA when the EPA is friendly to them, a la right now, Mr. Tactical Pants, I guess is what he is. And so we have that issue, and this is endemic. It's in the Fed government, it's in the state government. We have a small number of rich people influencing our decisions, whether it's in the EPA, whether it's in the governor's office, whether it's in the leadership in the House or the Senate, or whether it's in the Corporation Commission. And that's why we end up having these things out in our rural areas in Oklahoma, and it doesn't happen in New York. It's not going to happen in Chicago. It's going to be here because they know they have big business friendly people who are not thinking first about the 3.9 million people living right beside them.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson, can I ask one more question? Okay, I don't want to keep you on. I have one more question, I promise. Okay, thank you. This will be our final question before our final thoughts, and Ashley, we'll let you go first. Many Oklahomans will soon see a refund with their OG&E bill. How will you help fairly regulate utilities to ensure consumers get reliable and affordable electricity, natural gas, phone, and other services?
So I think one of the major things that needs to be talked about is restoring the voice of the people back to the Corporation Commission. So I'm one of those people in Oklahoma who has definitely been impacted by poverty, by lower socioeconomic standards, these different situations that have put me in a position where I could not afford to pay my utility bill on time on a certain month. And what happened to me, and I really feel really sympathetic for a lot of the people who are much worse off than me who experience these things. But what happens with OG&E, for instance, they charge you an extremely outrageous rate. And then once you do not pay your bill in time, that goes basically, you have to pay an enormous fee just to get it reconnected. So it's really putting people who are impoverished, our most vulnerable Oklahomans, in a really bad position. And I don't think that that's something that we should be doing as Oklahomans who are abiding by the so-called Oklahoman standard. Our people should have at least, at the bare minimum, access to heat in the winter and the ability to alleviate themselves from the heat in the summer. And we're not seeing that happen right now. I'm seeing people people in indigenous communities throughout the state and black communities throughout the state and low socioeconomic communities throughout the state not affording to be able to pay their utility bills and having to jump through hoops and bounds just to get that utility turned back on. So one of the things that I will do if I'm elected to this position, and when I am, is to make sure that the voice of the people is listened to, that it is accounted for in that commission, and when decisions are made on behalf of Oklahomans, that the best interests of Oklahomans are kept in mind when I make those decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Blake.
Okay. First off, if there's going to be a rate increase, obviously that's one of the things the Corporation Commission approves or disapproves is a rate increase. My actions as a commissioner, and on the handout I gave, I state this many, many times on our site. Every action I take, every vote I take in the commission will be for 3.9 million Oklahomans. Not for CEOs, not for big companies, not for stockholders, shareholders, etc. It's going to be for the average people out there who have to come up with the money to pay these monthly bills, or who have to deal with water pollution and air pollution and groundwater pollution. When it comes to, for example, electric companies, first thing I want to look at is what are the rates in our surrounding states? What's Texas paying for equivalent? What's Kansas, Arkansas paying? If we're paying more, don't come asking for an increase. If you're giving your CEO $30 million bonus at the end of the year for running such a great ship, don't come looking to us for more money. Re-examine your budget. And if you come in and start wanting us to pay for things for you to build, we got to start saying no to that. We pay for things in advance for the electric companies and utilities to improve. It's one thing if they can show us it's succeeded somewhere. We don't want to be the experimental group that pays for their mistakes.
Thank you. And Beau.
I'd ask all of y'all to look at your last electric bill. Go home and look at it. There will be a very small portion of your bill that actually directly, good evening, Connie, directly relates to the cost of fuel to that utility company. And on your utility bill, you'll see it. It's a rate adjustment. That is supposed to be a pass-through from the cost of the fuel to the utility company directly to the ratepayers. It's not happening. This $64 million refund or decrease by OG&E is they're calling that a monumental. It is not monumental. It is $4 a month per family reduction. And it's supposed to address the energy cost savings over the last few years that OG&E has enjoyed. And I would just bet that if you all keep your utility bills from year to year, you will see that you paid much more in the last year than $4 a month difference from the year before, or the year before that, or the year before that. So that's one way that things have just got to change. The commission is charged with regulating utility bills. They need to regulate them. Another huge waste that needs to be regulated by the commission, or at least influenced by the commission, is that OG&E, I talked to you, a minute ago about only less than 10% of electricity is generated from wind. About 40% of electricity in the state of Oklahoma is generated by coal. That coal is not a good way to generate electricity. It's expensive. And it's expensive because we are buying coal from Wyoming. Now that's just silly. And that's why our utility rates are too high and should be a fraction of what they are. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our question and answer segment. We're going to give our candidates 90 seconds for their closing remarks. And I believe next on the list would be Blake, I believe.
Okay. Well, we've had great questions tonight. I mean, wonderful questions, and from you guys, and we all appreciate it. It gives us an opportunity to tell you what we're really about. Like I said earlier, I've had 30 years experience in the oil and gas industry in Oklahoma. But I've had about double that life as an Oklahoman. And I see a lot of things going on that are to the great benefit of my industry, but that are not to the great benefit of our people. And this is what this race is about. We have to pull back the curtain. And the Corporation Commission is a great place to start, because that's where the major companies are regulated by people that they help fund and put in office. That needs to change. None of us are funded by, Harold Ham's not sending me Christmas cards, okay? None of us are funded by any of these guys. And let me tell you something, it seems like the last few years, our whole state government has just been ineffective. When we're on the news, it's for all the bad reasons. It's never something good, and if it's good, it wasn't about government. This was the first capital of Oklahoma, right here in this town. And I think, I proposed maybe about 3 this morning, we all run up to Oklahoma City, get the Great Seal, bring it back to Guthrie, and let you guys start anew and run the government like it's supposed to be run. I think you'd do a lot better job. You got a much better history. It's been downhill since it went to Oklahoma City. But anyway, thank you guys for having us, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you. Beau.
Thank you. I am not going to say when I am your commissioner. I'm going to say if you make me your commissioner and I ask you to do that, these things will happen. I will pursue proper and appropriate and effective regulation of wastewater disposal and fracking. I will seek utility rate reductions that are based on reasonable usage of the energy that we have right here in our great state to generate our electricity. I will ensure that the voice of the people is heard to these telecommunications companies, to be told that if you want to do business in our state of Oklahoma, if you want to provide internet and cell phone service here, you will provide it all over our state and not just 60% of our state. I will seek a long-term goal of a balance between all energy sources. And again, I want to repeat, an unfettered, fair, level playing field, and let the best win out, the cleanest, the safest, the cheapest for this great state. I do ask that you vote for me for Corporation Commission to represent the Democratic Party come November. If I'm your candidate, I promise you, I will call out, it's a throwdown, I will call out the Republican nomination for a debate on the footsteps of every county courthouse in this state. Call them out to answer just these questions. What'd you do about the earthquakes? Why does 40% of our state not have adequate cell phone? What do you intend to do about these utilities, and why haven't you already done it? Thank you.
Thank you. Ashley, you get the final word tonight.
So I'm running for the Corporation Commission because I love Oklahomans and I love the land. I'm a mother, I'm a community organizer, and as an enrolled member of the Absentee Shawnee Tribe of Oklahoma, my family has lived in this land for at least 10 generations. And as a mother, I'm hoping that my family can continue to live here for at least 10 more generations down the road. As your Corporation Commissioner, I will make sure that the voice of Oklahomans, your voice, is restored back to that agency, because we have too much protection of industry and not enough protection of our Oklahoma citizens who make this state great. Some of the things that I'll accomplish once I'm elected to that position, I will get a hold on these wastewater injection wells. I will be the voice to make sure that something gets done about these earthquakes. As someone who's already made great strides in the renewable energy fight here in Oklahoma, I will make sure that those pathways for renewable energy are opened up to better our economy and our environment. And finally, I will make sure, as a community organizer, this is what I do. I've already made Bob Anthony shake in his boots on the steps of the Oklahoma Corporation Commission. And you can all watch that on United States of Oil and Gas, taped by Viceland TV. It was shown worldwide. I've already done that. I have the strong voice. I can make sure that he shakes in his boots all the way till November, and then we can get a Democrat elected. So I'm asking for your vote. I'm hoping that you go to the polls tomorrow from 8 to 6. Saturday from 9 to 2, or if you have to wait, then Tuesday. Vote Ashley Nicole McCray for your Oklahoma Corporation Commissioner, and I will make sure that the voice of the people is restored back to that agency, and together we can create a better future for all Oklahomans. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. That concludes our forum for the Corporation Commissioner candidates. We've got 3 great candidates. We appreciate all 3 of you guys coming. Give them a round of applause.
Thank you for having us.